George W. Bush promised us a foreign policy with humility. Instead, he has brought us humiliation in the eyes of the world. He promised to restore honor and integrity to the White House. Instead, he has brought deep dishonor to our country and built a durable reputation as the most dishonest president since Richard M. Nixon. Honor, he decided to no longer honor the Geneva Conventions. Just as he would not honor the opinion and experience of people who have been involved with the military, just as he would not honor the United Nations, international treaties, the opinions of our allies, the role of Congress and the courts, or what Jefferson described as a decent respect for the opinion of mankind. He did not honor the judgment of our military leaders in designing his invasion of Iraq, and now he will not honor our fallen dead by attending any funerals or by even permitting any photos of their flag-draped coffins. How did we get to where we are? How did we get from September 12th, 2001, when a leading French newspaper ran a giant headline with the words, "We are all Americans now," a time when we had the goodwill and empathy of all the world, to now, to the horror that we all felt in witnessing the pictures of torture at Abu Ghraib? Well, to begin with, from its earliest days in power, this administration sought to radically destroy the foreign policy consensus that had guided America since the end of World War II. The long successful strategy of containment was abandoned in favor of the new experimental strategy that they called preemption, and what they meant by preemption was not the inherent right of any nation to act preemptively against an imminent threat to its national security, but rather an exotic new approach that asserted a unique and unilateral U.S. right to ignore international law whenever it wished to do so, and to launch military action against any nation, even in circumstances where there was no imminent threat. All that is required in the view of the Bush team is the mere assertion of a possible future threat, and the assertion need be made by only one person, the president. More disturbing still was their frequent use of the word dominance to describe their strategic goal. Disturbing because an American policy of dominance is as repugnant to the rest of the world as the ugly pictures of dominance of those helpless, naked Iraqi prisoners has been to the people of our country. Dominance is as dominance does. Dominance is not really a strategic policy or political philosophy at all. It is rather a seductive illusion that tempts the powerful to satiate their hunger for still more power by striking a Faustian bargain. And as always happens, sooner or later, to those who shake hands with the devil, they find out too late that what they have given up in the bargain is their soul. One of the clearest indications of the impending loss of intimacy with one's soul is the failure to recognize the existence of a soul in those over whom power is being exercised, especially if the helpless come to be dehumanized and treated as animals and degraded. We also know, and not just from Desaad and Freud, the psychological proximity between sexual depravity and other people's pain. It has been especially shocking and awful to see these paired evils perpetrated so crudely and cruelly in the name of the United States of America. Those pictures of torture and sexual abuse came to us embedded in a wave of news about escalating casualties and growing chaos enveloping our entire policy in Iraq. But in order to understand the failure of our overall policy, I believe it is important to focus specifically on what exactly happened in Abu Ghraib prison and ask whether or not those actions were representative of who we are as Americans. Obviously, the quick answer is no, but unfortunately, it's more complicated than that. There is good and evil in every person. And what makes the United States special in the history of nations is our commitment to the rule of law and our carefully constructed system of checks and balances. Our natural distrust of concentrated power and our devotion to openness and democracy are what have led us as a people to consistently choose good over evil in our collective aspirations more than the people of any other nation. Our founders were insightful students of human nature. They feared the abuse of power because they understood that every human being has not only better angels in his or her nature, but also an innate vulnerability to temptation, especially the temptation to abuse power over others. Our founders understood full well that a system of checks and balances is needed in our Constitution because every human being lives every day with an internal system of checks and balances that cannot be relied upon to produce virtue if they are allowed to attain an unhealthy degree of power over their fellow citizens. Listen then to the balance of internal impulses described by one of those accused of abusing prisoners, Specialist Charles Grainer, when he was confronted by one of his colleagues, Specialist Joseph M. Darby, who later became a courageous whistleblower. And pardon my language as I quote Grainer, when Darby asked Grainer to explain the actions that Darby had discovered on the photo disc, Grainer replied, and I quote, "The Christian in me says it's wrong, but the corrections officer says I love to make a grown man piss on himself." What happened at that prison, it is now clear, was not the result of random acts by a few bad apples. It was the natural consequence of the Bush administration policy that has dismantled those wise constraints and made war on America's system of checks and balances and accountability and responsibility for action. The abuse of the prisoners at Abu Ghraib flowed directly from the abuse of the truth that characterized the administration's march to war and the abuse of the trust that had been placed in President Bush by the American people in the aftermath of September 11th.